Let's see. All right, looks like we have a few people here joining us already. So we're gonna get started. I like to be on time, so 2 o'clock, here we go. Welcome everyone. Oh, I'm gonna change this to gallery view so that everyone can see both of us. Welcome those of us who are here. I'm so glad that we're having this conversation, that people are joining us and showing up in this space to talk about some of these difficult things that we really need to be talking about. Joining us today is an amazing person. Her name is Taren Bradley. She is the Senior Social Event Planner for Magnolia, Bluebird Design and Events. And she is here to have a conversation with me to discuss ways in which we can be anti-racist. Author Ibram Kendi, in his book, said, How to Be an Anti-Racist, says, you're either racist or anti-racist. There's no such thing as not racist. And I've done a lot of, looking into resources and learning about this and trying to understand what that means. I've always considered myself to be an anti-racist, but in no way, shape, or form is that an end point. I think it's a continuing thing that you're always, you're always learning and you're always growing by having deeper understanding from, the things that you read and see and talking to people. So to me, being anti-racist means taking action against racism. And so Taren, I really want you to share, I don't like it when we talk about, when we say to Black people, tell us how to be anti-racist, because it's not your job. It's not your job to tell us how to be anti-racist. But what I find helps me, and what I hope helps other people, is hearing about your experiences and your insights and telling us about those, so then we have a better understanding from our Black colleagues about what they have experienced, and we have a better awareness of it. So if you don't mind sharing, maybe some of your experiences where you've seen racism show up in the wedding industry.
So first of all, thank you all. Thanks for everyone for coming on. When Jennifer emailed me and texted me and said, hey, do you want to be on this conversation? I said yes, and then I got a little scared, I'll be honest. I am by no means a subject matter expert on diversity and inclusion. I am a subject matter expert on myself and my experiences in the industry. So I'd love to continue the conversation and have a broader and a chat about other people who've experienced things like me, or if I'm just the only person in the room who's experienced it and it's a one-off, is fine as well. The term anti-racist lately has been a hot button. I have seen Ibram Kendi before, and live and in person a few times actually, and his message and his story is something that is useful for everyone. This is not a new book. This book is old. This is not a new phenomenon. It's just very useful in tools and actions that we use today. One of the things that we have talked about before in our previous panel session that I saw with Kurt Bob, he mentioned getting stopped at the front desk when you're walking into a high-level hotel, and how everyone is walking past you and you're the only person being stopped. It happens all the time. The added extra to that as a planner is when you go up to the front desk and you're asking for the room key to go put things in the bridal suite, because you want the bridal suite or the couple suite to be laid out correctly. You want to put the flowers in there, you want to put a veil in there, you want to put this tuxedo jackets in there, and there is a almost pause in debate in someone's head. You can see it going on, whether or not to hand you the room key, a lot of times they will then say, well, we'll have someone escort you up. And I get it. Legally in a hotel, that's what you really should do. But I also know that my counterparts who are not of color, they just slide 2 room keys across the table. Here you go. Here are your 2 room keys, and keep it moving. We need to make sure that when those things happen, that we're discussing it, that we're talking about it, that we're making it known and aware to the catering sales manager, the event manager who we're dealing with, because a lot of times we're just absorbing it, taking it in, and moving on. But if we don't make people aware, then it's not allowing them the opportunity to be anti-racist in their practice at their business.
Yeah.
That's just one.
That's a powerful example, and it's not something that I have experienced myself, and it's unfortunate. These are the things that I think are examples of systemic racism, things that that come out that maybe people weren't aware of before, but I think it's important that they become aware of those things, and that we start to understand these little situations where they do show up, and it's in those situations where we can make real change, I think, if we bring light to it.
Right. And I think that depending on what the audience here that's listening, whether you are an independent owner or you're working within a system of working for a hotelier or a catering company or somewhere where there's a bigger entity, there's a conversation that you can have amongst each other on how and ways to combat this, how you're going to talk about it. Being an ally is giving the safe space for someone to say, this is what's happening to me, and you to say, no, you're not crazy, or to disregard you, to say, oh, you're overreacting, to listen and to take it in, but then to also ask, what would you like me to do about this? Sometimes I just want to come in the room, close the door, scream for a minute, and walk back out because I got it. Or sometimes I may want you to help me figure out ways to combat this, to have the dialogue. Sometimes people, we have the misnomer of the angry Black woman as the person. If I'm always the person complaining, then everyone thinks I'm the only one overreacting. But if I'm in a room full of 5 or 6 other people who saw what I saw and understood what I felt, my expectation is that you also are vocal. And those are ways to then be anti-racist in making sure that what you saw and what you heard and know is not correct. And saying, this is not correct. But then on top of it, how are we going to make changes and moves to institute the change? Just telling someone they're incorrect is not what's going to make changes in the future for yourself, for others in the business, and for your employees, your clients, and other people. We have to start asking the bigger question of, okay, this wasn't right. Why do you feel this way? How did you get to this point? And what is it within our company and system that makes you feel like this is okay? And how do we break that down and make sure that others don't feel like it's okay, that it's not a systemic thing?
Yeah. I'm wondering if you have any other specific examples that you are willing to share, or anything that you can think of that might be useful for us to hear in terms of what you've experienced.
So there's some commentary that comes up a lot. Things like, you're so well-spoken, or you're so articulate. I want people to really think about how you say things to, we now have talked a lot after the Me Too movement of things that we say to women and girls that we wouldn't say to our boys, right? So now let's extend that to what we would say to people of color versus what you would say to a white male. So if at the end of the sentence, if you say, you're so well-spoken for a white guy, that just sounds absurd, right? It just doesn't even sound correct coming out. So when you say, oh, you're so well-spoken, you're basically saying, you're so well-spoken for a Black woman. Well, am I not supposed to be well-spoken? Am I not, do I not deserve to be in this room? So if I'm in this room and I deserve to be in this room, I should be well spoken. The narrative is different when you're saying something like, that point you just made was very articulate, or it was very eloquent, that point you made. That is different than saying someone is well spoken. That happens quite a bit. When I went to a prestigious boarding school in New England, and a lot of things that were said to me, and this was in the 90s, but still kind of happens, are things like, "You're so pretty for a Black girl." Be careful with the whatever, with the classifications of it. You know, no one wants to be put into a category. You just want to be a pretty girl, right? Or a pretty or handsome man. So we want to make sure that we're changing our vocabulary amongst ourselves in small circles, and then amongst others in larger circles. This goes back to, again, we talked about the systemic part of it, is making sure that our vocabulary is changing. We are still working on and talking about changing our vocabulary, instead of saying bride or bridal party to couples and wedding party, and we make that effort to do so. We need to start also making these efforts in terms of persons of color.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. You know, it's a lot about the vocabulary and how we speak to each other, and how we you know, talk about different things, you know, and people and groups of people too. No matter what, you know, color or race they are. I mean, you know, speaking about, you know, that group of people that, you know, they're always late, or, you know, those kinds of things are unacceptable. You know, it's
Be careful with they.
Yeah.
Like,
they.
what is they?
Yeah. Who are they?
Who are they? And if you're in a situation where you're hearing someone say it, it's okay to just kind of naively say, well, who are they? And kind of step back and allow people to process what they're saying.
Right.
Some people will not even realize what they're saying, and will then say, well, I really meant, okay, well, let's have a conversation about it. Who are they? Or there are people who know what they meant, and they're very quick to stutter, sidestep, and try to get out of the conversation. But that is calling people out and making the active, being active in trying and being anti-racist. Being anti-racist is a verb. It's an action. It's a thing. It's not a title. It's not a title. It's not like, oh, I can wear the t-shirt and say that I am. It is an active thing that everybody must do. No matter what color you are, everyone must work at it. If you are a person of color or are in a position to make a change, and you sit in a room and say nothing when things are going on around you that need to be spoken to, then you're not being anti-racist. You are complicit in what is happening, and that's not helping any side of this conversation.
Yeah, and I think I think that I have been, you know, fairly, you know, progressive in terms of the way that I have, you know, always thought about people of color, but again, as that's part of a continuing journey, I think it requires self-reflection and self-evaluation, and constant awareness of how things, you know, how the world has treated, you know, people of color. And more recently, I think I've seen, at least today and the last couple of days, people circulating the timeline of, you know, how, you know, Black people have come to America. They came, you know, 400 years ago as slaves, and, you know, for 300 years of that were in slavery, were kept as slaves in slavery. And then, you know, it's only been in the last 100 years, you know, that we've, even allowed them to vote and allowed them to be, owning property and to, create their own lives for themselves. And I think like that is a strong piece of awareness for people who maybe, feel like, well, I've struggled in my life, it's been hard for me, I've had a difficult path. Well, yes, but did you have 400 years of slavery that you are trying to, build yourself out of? And those revelations are important.
No one wants to negate anybody else's struggle.
I'm sorry, say
And
that again.
no one wants to negate anyone else's struggle.
Mm-hmm.
People struggle. I admire people who come through adversity, but we all have to respect each other's struggle and understand that some people's struggle may be a generational systemic thing that people are working through versus something that may just be something that you're working through from the past 5 years, or something that you worked through when you were a child coming to now. We have to also understand and give ownership and give allow people to work through those things and applaud people who have, but also to understand that what Black and Indigenous people of color in this country have been through are things that are deep seated into the fabric of how our country is built. So those things that you can overcome is something that you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps type thing. But if you're in a culture where you tell someone to pull someone up by their bootstraps and they don't even have boots, you're talking to someone who can't even help themselves because of the way the system is set up for them to not even start at the same point that you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So getting back to more specifically in the wedding industry, I'm interested to know your thoughts on, maybe who some of the gatekeepers are that show up that we could be, addressing more specifically. I mean, I have ideas about it too, but I wonder if you have thoughts about it and, how that is important.
Well, yeah, so I know that you and I have talked about a little of this in the past. So there's some I went to venues are a gatekeeper. A lot of venues have a preferred vendor list.
I'm sorry. Let's define gatekeeper, meaning
cool.
people who in the industry who hold the power to either make those changes or that have a certain level of influence over how things happen.
So there's a couple levels. I think everybody's a gatekeeper to their own circle, their own life, their own small circle at a lunch with 4 or 5 other planners. When someone says something, you have the power to say, well, what about this vendor? Or what about that vendor? Or have you seen this person's work? There are associations that have leadership that when people pay dues to a membership, they're expecting you to lead all of those members and to give and provide good and accurate information to the best of your ability to all of those members. So there is a definite responsibility that a lot of associations have. We have to be careful about some of the platforms that we allow people to be on who are not as informed as they should be. I think a lot of times we come up with ideas and put things out and say someone is a this or that without looking at the panel and saying, okay, everyone on this panel is homogenous and looks alike. How do we incorporate more people into this panel so that folks who are watching this can see other experts in a certain craft? That exposure leads to Instagram posts and following, which leads to more business, which leads to an increased revenue for that said business. There are ways that people are shutting doors without even realizing or knowing that the doors are being shut because they think they don't know people, or they don't know how to ask, or they don't pay attention to what it looks like to those on the outside.
Mhm.
What other ones? Trying to
That's
think.
a great point. Actually, to that point, I would say that there's also been some discussion about avoiding tokenism, and I don't. I certainly think that that's could probably be a whole separate, discussion. But one of the things that I have found that has been helpful for me is that you have to. I think vendors. I think people who hold the gatekeepers in our industry they have to do the work. They have to go out there and get to know, and purposely and intentionally get to know who some of the vendors are that are persons of color, that maybe are outside of the circle that they have been already surrounding themselves with. I think doing that work, getting to know those people, having lunch with those people, inviting them in, and understanding who they are, and then making decisions about their work, and is that a good fit for what you need for your organization. But I think it's really important for people to know, gatekeepers in particular, that it's not just, oh, here's a Black person who can be a speaker on my panel, oh, I'll just add them to the speaker lineup. It's you need to get to know these people and understand what their business is about, and who they are on a deeper level, and not just kind of tokenize people. I think that's important.
Yeah, I think that the hospitality industry in particular, we are a we're community. We are very most of us, some of us are introverts. I'm slightly an introvert. So, but we know that networking and actually building community is how we get our business, right? So nobody that I know of wants a handout. Nobody wants to be paired with a client that's not a good fit because the execution is not going to come out the way you want it to. There are people who are great at different things within our industry, no matter what their color is, correct? So there are different types of photographers like yourself. They all can be great, but they all have their own individual style and substance that fits best with certain clients. People of color, we're not a monolith. We don't just have the same type of planning companies, the same type of florists, the same type of stationery company. We have variety as well. So all we're asking for is when someone has a list or has that they're looking for, that a person who is the best fit is in consideration. In order to know that, again, like you said, we got to have conversations. You have to get to know someone. You can't just call me and ask me to refer 3 DJs. I give you those 3 DJs and you just turn that list over to a client and think that they're going to be the best fit unless you've made the phone call, unless you've gotten to know the person, unless you know that that person is a good fit for your client. We have to start having those real authentic connections and get past the fear of, I don't know if I'm going to say the wrong thing. I don't know if I'm asking the right questions. Get past that fear, because we're all, at the end of the day, we're looking for something that best fits our client, that's going to bring the best event for our clients. And if you can't pick up the phone and make a phone call to get to know your vendor partners, then you're doing a disservice to your client as well.
It's true. And also, if you are not, if you don't have a diverse set of voices in your, in the groups that you're referring to, or the people that you're choosing to be part of your, circle of people that you refer, then you're really missing out. I think that's a huge thing for me, is that, when I recognize that people are, homogenous in their groups and their groupings of, who they're choosing to work with. It makes me sad, because I feel like there's just so much more to, that people of color, that, any kind of diverse, group of people has so much to add to the conversation, so much creativity to add to the world. It's a better, brighter, more colorful world when we have more diversity in our circles. It's that's just something I think everybody, I hope really can understand that and take that away from you know, some of these conversations that we're having, that, you know, we're all better off by knowing, you know, more people of different backgrounds.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it. African people brought the banjo over, which created country music, which created in the blues,
Mhm.
which went to jazz,
Mhm.
which went to what's R&B and top 40 music right now that everyone listens to, which leads to hip hop, which everyone is now in every commercial, even on some random commercials now, is all over the place.
Mhm.
Black culture is everywhere. Black culture is what feeds commercials and print and television and movies now. So why wouldn't you want to be knowledgeable and understand and be a part of getting that culture from the source?
Yeah, absolutely.
It is amazing that it takes something as simple as changing your algorithms on your Instagram page.
Mhm.
Danielle, our owner, and I have talked about this recently. She said, I just had to change my algorithm. Once I started liking and following different vendors and different artists and different, it doesn't even need to be in our industry. It can be painters, artists, it can be dancers, it can be journalists. Once you start following, your algorithm will start changing and you'll start seeing amazing, extraordinary work from all sorts of people around the world.
Mhm.
If your Facebook and Instagram feed is a homogenous, change the algorithm and you'll start seeing the amazing things that are happening outside your back door.
Mhm.
There's so many things going on around the country that if you change your algorithm, you'll see amazing things that are happening in California and Florida and Texas. It's the same way. If you change your algorithm for persons of color, you'll see some amazing events and some amazing planners and vendors right in your own backyard that you didn't even know were doing great work.
Mhm. Yep. I, I believe that. Yeah, the algorithm is something that I feel like is a metaphor kind of for our society. You know, it's like
Right? These
it's
simple
sort of
little things that we can do that would change if you just switch a little bit.
mhm,
Your eyes will open up completely different.
mhm. Yeah. Let's see, who are some other gatekeepers that maybe that we might need to hold accountable in the industry? We've talked a little bit about some of the, you know, event organizers and,
Mhm.
you know, the conferences that we hold up in our industry. I think that is, you know, an important place for things to for us to see some change. I think venues, I agree. Also, publications. I
Yep.
think that's, you know, a big uh, influence over, you know, what's held up in our society. You know, if Harper's Bazaar puts out a list of the top wedding planners in the United States, and you know, that's then people follow them, and then
Right.
more people hear about them, and that's how that kind of escalates. They're a gatekeeper. They you know, can manipulate or change, not manipulate, but change who they hold up
Yes.
in our industry, and also who they're showing and who they're featuring.
And representation matters. We can go back through about how representation matters as me as a little kid growing up, and I'll get to that. But in publications in particular, representation matters for a couple getting married, flipping through a magazine and not seeing themselves and wondering, are these type of events for me? Am I capable of this? It is flipping through and being a young planner or a young photographer and looking through and saying, well, do I want to get into the wedding industry because I'm not sure if Black photographers are making it in the wedding industry. We know that's not true, but when you're flipping through a magazine and there's no representation, that is what you're telling people. Um, Not explaining what, again, the criteria is and not talking through what the criteria is and not being transparent is something that I think a lot of publications are having some issues with, of how they're picking these people and how this information is coming to them. I applaud a lot of these publications for recently posting these lists of top 100 Black businesses and top 100 this and top 10 and top 5. But you know what? We want to be the top in the best of the best, period, and deserve to be on the list of the best, period. Sending out one list on the website is great because it's giving some exposure, but when the next year comes around and that top 50 list comes out overall, how many of those has that publication done research on to see if they are valued enough and hold up to the same type of work as non-persons of color do? And are they being included in that overall list? We don't mind the recognition, but a seat at that table also means something. It means that even if in your heart of hearts, you know you're 150 times better than 90% of the people on that list, it still feels good when you get that Oscar, you know? And no matter how you slice it and you say, you know, this performance was better than that, when that person gets the Oscar, there is a certain level of validation that comes along with it. There are persons of color who are in this industry deserve that validation as well, and not just an off-putting list because we've pushed people into recognizing that we exist. Now that you recognize that we exist, now how are we going to incorporate this into an all-inclusive list that really gives a good segment on how the world itself is working and how the world itself is doing events. There are brown and Black people all over the country doing amazing, all over the world, doing amazing events that just need the platform to show them.
Yep. Okay, so let's see, we've talked a little bit, we've sort of, touched on how to identify racism when it happens in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't, I don't want to say the person of color has to tell us how to fight racism, but
we're friends. This is a conversation that friends should have. So as a friend, if you ask me, I would tell you. Okay. And that's as a friend.
Yeah. Is there anything that has worked for you in fighting racism when it has come up? Is there, some ways that you found that have helped you more than others?
A couple things. One, I have learned to step back and allow the moment to pass and then have the quiet conversation. Fighting on Facebook doesn't necessarily change minds. Mm-hmm. I check you, I see who you are, I keep a little mental Rolodex of who you are when you say things, but having an argument back and forth for me doesn't give me any satisfaction. Calling you up on the phone and having a one-on-one conversation saying, this made me uncomfortable, this is what I got from it. A lot of times the initial response is a defensive response, or the new response is, well, I wasn't talking about you. Well, who were you talking about? Are you talking about my cousin that's in the industry? Are you talking about my uncle that's in this industry? Who are you talking about if you weren't talking about me? I'm telling you, I feel uncomfortable, which means that a lot of other people probably felt uncomfortable, and let's talk through it. Those things seem to have worked for me. I have also at times, I will be honest, have just removed myself from the situation. I tend to not want to block people on social media, but I've had to remove myself from negative energy. This situation that we're in right now is uplifting and tiring at the same time. It is tiring to always be vigilant and always be the voice for a lot of other people who don't have a voice if I'm given the platform. Sometimes I don't want to go on social media and look at things and comment, because sometimes it just breaks your heart over and over and over again. But, I saw the meme that someone said, like, allies, if you're tired from 3 weeks talking about George Floyd, add an entire 400 years of what we're tired of. So, you know, the changes and the good things that I have seen are just when I'm about to go in and respond to somebody on social media, I see a person not of color, a white person, respond and really have these robust conversations back and forth that have been so telling and uplifting to say, for me to be able to sit back and go, okay, I can just watch this exchange. I can watch this exchange. Um, the other part is, you know, analogies work. You know, I don't know if anyone saw like the 4th of July memes and analogies that like happy all countries day, all countries matter. Well, you know, those type of conversations, very simple things that say, you know, when the Vegas shooting happened and everyone was Vegas strong, no one said, well, my city matters. Vegas needed help in uplifting at that moment. Police brutality in this country against Black and brown people at this moment is at a disproportionate height that needs to be addressed. And that is what we're saying. We're not saying that police brutality against anyone else is okay. We're not saying that the systemic other things that are happening in this world need to be forgotten. What we're saying is that at this moment in time, the system that has created a platform to allow people to be treated the way they are by the police needs to be broken down and rebuilt. And that comes across the board from education to how we treat each other on day-to-day interaction, all the way through when we get to, by the time someone becomes a police officer, this should not be a conversation that we have if we're raising kids to be great, productive citizens.
Yeah. And when you said, you know, it's a continuing conversation, you know, and that white allies need to not, you know, feel exhausted by it. With this series that I've been doing for the Baltimore crowd, we started out with, you know, some really great a panel discussion and then a couple of other discussions. And I really want to encourage people to continue to show up in this space and continue to talk about these things and not be afraid to, you know, be vulnerable and to ask questions and, you know, to be honest about, you know, where we all are and how we can be better. I think that's an important thing. And I will continue to allow this space to happen. You know, we may divert from time to time, you know, give people some time to, you know, maybe absorb some of the educational opportunities that are available, you know, and give them time to maybe reflect and self-reflect. But I intend to continue to open up the space and make it available for anyone who is willing to show up to, you know, to talk about this and, you know, make any suggestions about where we should be focusing our conversation and what we should be talking about. It's something.
You know, at the end of the day, most people are good people, right? They are. We have, and we tend to do things that are slightly irresponsible at times. We tend to say things that are irresponsible at times. And when we do, we may want to be or need to be corrected, but it doesn't mean that that person is no longer a good person. Right? So I think a lot of times right now in particular, we're having this fear of talking about race because we have this fear that if we say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing, you're going to be labeled as a bad person. And when you're coming from a place of honesty and you're coming from a place of love for your family, for the country, for where you are, if you make the mistake, the conversation can be had to correct the mistake. It doesn't mean that someone, because they make a comment or they tell a wrong joke, that they all need to be thrown out with the baby with the bathwater. It is a teachable learning moment that we all have to get through. We all have to stumble and make those mistakes. I do it. I said bride earlier today in this conversation when I need to say couple. We all do it all the time, but it's acknowledging and understanding and knowing where it comes from Is it a habit that is ingrained and learned that you need to relearn and you need to practice? That's something that we do. Is it something that you just were taught and raised and need to be brought into your attention that you had no idea because your circle was your circle? Then that's something that we move and learn and move towards. You know, we didn't start these conversations to, I am a fan of sometimes, but I'm not a big fan of the cancel culture. So to demonize people. I am a person who wants to educate people and allow them to step back, breathe, hear what we're saying, and then move forward positively. Now, if you hear what I'm saying and then you throw it all away, then I know how to treat you or behave around you. But I am not of the mindset that the moment that you say something wrong to me, that I don't have a conversation with you about how to correct it. And we can move forward from there as professionals. We need to take that fear away from that conversation of race, because it's not going to get any better until we allow the platform for people to really have the conversations and to really get honest about where it comes from and where those feelings and comments and automatic microaggressions that just flow out of people, where they come from. Once you understand where they come from, it becomes easier to fix.
Yeah.
It becomes easier to recognize and say, okay, got it, next thing, and then we can continue to grow.
That's a beautiful statement. I love that statement. Yeah. So let's see. Anything else that we want to add to the conversation? I know we want to wrap up. It is also my intention to try and keep these conversations not too long, although they're super important. We do have to give them the time that they need, but sitting in front of a Zoom webinar is like something that everybody.
It's sometimes a little hard. There's some little things. So, follow some folks. There's an Instagram person called Evolve Teacher. She's amazing. She's an amazing teacher out of, I think she's like in Malaysia, somewhere crazy. But she really talks about how we can, things that are triggers for people, why people of certain cultures do different things. It's a really great, and how she's educating preschoolers on being anti-racist and how we can do that. And one of the things that she talked about was, and I think a lot of people do it, it's not just white people, a lot of people do it, is we demonize the word brown. Brown is always dirty. Brown is always ugly. People don't like brown. Black hats, black people who wear black are bad, right? So we demonize those words, but then when a young child hears someone is black or someone is brown, how are they correlating that in their little minds? There's so many beautiful shades of brown, just like there's so many beautiful shades of people. There's mocha and sepia and all these other colors, and all of us who are in the industry love color, right? So we need to make sure that we're not saying, ooh, don't color it the ugly color, which happens. We've all done it, right? It's just that natural thing. Don't do that. But when a child hears that, they hear dirty or ugly. And conversely, when they see someone is that color of that crayon, what is the correlation that they're being taught and told that we don't even realize that we're teaching them? There are those little things that we can start doing, making sure we read books that are inclusive to our smaller kids, to our younger children, making sure we are having conversations about things that are on TV now with our older children. Hey, did you notice this? Did you see that? Did you see how that happened? Did you see why that happened? Did you see how that man talked to that woman? Did you see how those things, we have to start having those conversations so that it brings clarity to what we're fighting against. If we as moms and parents and adults are fighting something, we then have to keep that and go level down. We have to make sure that our children are also have the tools and are equipped to not only be able to correct their friends when their friends are wrong, but feel proud about it and feel good about it. And also be able to create circles around themselves, their communities, who have different looks and tastes and likes and religions and family structures, two moms, two dads, someone's Hindu, someone's Muslim, all those things. When your children grow up in those environments, they're less likely to use they, because they is us. They are my friends. So we need to make sure that we're also trending that not just in our industry, because this issue is a world issue. This is not just an industry issue. That we are making sure that we are making sure we're raising the next group of hospitality people the same way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if we, I believe that if we change the world, we'll change the industry too. It will, it all kind of ties together. It's, you can't do one and not the other. It's, important to change it everywhere that it shows up. So
yeah. And that's what being an ally is, right? It's as simple as just saying, hey, I saw that didn't sit right with me. Are you okay? And immediately I know that I am not the only crazy person in the room who just saw and heard that.
mm-hmm.
And just that one thing can change my mindset and make me a stronger, more able person in that building, at that event, with that person who addressed me incorrectly. Right? I then now have I stand up a little straighter, my shoulders go back a little bit more, and I know that no, this is not just me in my head. Someone else saw this, someone else is on my side, someone else is standing next to me, and we're going to then create change. And that is what I am hopeful for in recent times, in recent days. You and I are both in a group where on Facebook, where they have moms, and that the moms are always posting. And if anyone's mom, you can get on there, Moms Who Lead with Love, that we're all posting about social change and social justice. And we're asking the questions of each other. And there's no question that's too small or too large. Someone asked a question yesterday about whether your fist bump should be your color of your skin or brown. And it was a 30 response chorus conversation about it, which was great because it created a conversation space where people felt safe, where people felt knowledgeable, where people were getting information, and they were creating a community of people with like minds.
Yeah, and that's important. And I certainly welcome any suggestions from anyone who's here about some of the conversations they'd like to see happen, or some of the things that maybe we need to dive deeper into and talk a little bit about. I think one of the upcoming seminars that we're going to do is a group of panelists of white allies, and having white people talk to each other about what we're doing and how we're addressing this in our lives and in our work. So I think that's something that we're working on. So I'm going to wrap it up. Unless you have anything else to add, Taren, that you'd like us to know. I'm eternally grateful to you and your deep wisdom and your amazing insights. You really are just a wonderful person that I'm thankful to know, and I'm grateful for you. So
I'm grateful for you. You and we've had our coffee conversations and dessert conversations, and anything I can do to help, any conversations that people want to have, I am an open book. I will have it with you. I am invested in this industry in a way that most people are not. I'm a third generation hospitality professional. This is the career that paid for me to go to school and for me to go to high school. This is not a job. This was what my dad and my granddad did. I am eternally grateful for them, for teaching me to be in service of others. And on top of it, being raised in the district, going to marches with my mom and being part of the political process, also has created me to have an awareness and a patience sometimes that others may not have. um, but I am here for any other conversations. I'm here for any debate.
Mm.
Someone doesn't like what I said, I'm here for it. Let's have it because I want to learn too. I would love to learn more. I again I am not a subject matter expert at this. I think one of the other things that we will probably want to do as a whole is bring in someone who is a person who works in diversity and inclusion in a corporate space
Mhm.
to show us tools and tricks and things that we can incorporate into our business to break that systemic oppression that just happens without even with just a keystroke of how you type a text or an email. So I think those things can also grow us as a community as well. And I thank everyone for their time and their patience and taking a few minutes out of this crazy Tuesday. It's not raining yet. It was raining all night in my neighborhood. So
Yeah, it was here too. So yeah, thank you so much, Taren. I think you're amazing, and I look forward to lots of great conversations, and hope you have a wonderful day.
you too. Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.